Welcome to the BusyWise podcast. I'm Leslie Wilson, your host. Today, in the season 1 finale, we're sharing the best advice that our guests all through season 1 ever received. If you've watched all the episodes, then you've heard this advice before, but just listen again to what they shared, what their busy lives have taught them through experience, through wisdom passed from someone else, whatever that advice was that they received. First up is Susan Lloyd. Susan is a photographer in Charleston, South Carolina, and she shared about advice that her mother gave her and then advice that one of her photographer mentors gave her. The advice that her mother gave her about being ready for the moment really applies not just in the moment that her mother was talking about, but all through life. Make the most of it. And then the advice from her mentor to encourage you to always be learning ties right in with the same thing. Make the most of the opportunities that we have to learn. Make the most of everyday opportunities that we have in the moment that we're in right now. So listen again to what she shared and consider, how does that apply to your life? So tell me about the best advice you've ever received.
So there are two things I think that come to mind. One is that came from my mother when I was about to start high school. She said to me, make the most of your high school experience. I did not. She said I did not. She said I was not confident enough. I just kind of blended into the background, and I don't want you to do that. And I think maybe I would have taken that path anyway, because like I said, I'm just going to jump in feet first. But that was such great advice for me, because that's when I said, yeah, what's stopping me? If I want to be the president of the Beta Club my senior year, I'm going to do that. If I want to if I want to try out for the lead role in the musical my senior year, I'm going to do that. If I want to run cross country, I've never run cross country before, but if I want to do that, I'm going to do it. And those experiences help build you as a human being, especially at that age. And they help, again, give you experiences and exposure to things that if you don't do them, you shrink in your world a lot. And this can go through the rest of our life. And so, yeah, that piece of advice very definitely ties into the last thing I said, which is keep going through the open doors. And so that was one. What was really interesting about that, was that my mom gave me that advice, but it was my dad who lived it out. And I would sit, I remember so clearly, I would, again, look at pictures, his yearbooks. And I would look at his high school yearbooks, and I would see my dad was in all of the things. He also went to a very, very tiny high school with 18 people in his graduating class. So you kind of had to be in all the things. Excuse me. But his example, my dad never backed down from any opportunity he had. And that was the example. So it was really interesting to get the verbal from my mom, but the actual lived experience from my dad. So that probably was one of the biggest pieces of advice I got in my life. As a professional, I don't know, that one's a little harder because I'm kind of independent about things. I think probably, I think I had, and it was Chris Smith, who is also, he's just a great photographer who's had tons of incredible experiences. I think Chris was one of the ones who told me, always be ready to learn. Mm-hmm. And that seems so simple, but we can in our lives get to a point, especially when we've done something for a very long time, we can get to a point where we think, well, I've learned it all. And once you do that, you really kind of begin to die. Your professional life is going to stagnate. I feel like at least I would get to a point where I would not be fulfilled doing what I was doing because it was the same thing over and over. And so preparing to learn and being prepared to learn and seeking to learn new things, challenging myself, that's been huge because that builds a skill set. It builds my confidence as a photographer. And it took me a very long time to own that and to say, yeah, I am experienced. I have done these things. I have learned these things, and I have more to learn. And I hope I always say that. I'm always saying I have more to learn.
Our second guest, Lisa Lewis, shared about not setting expectations for the way other people should treat you or the way other people should act in any given situation, and how that is a measure of guarding your heart, but also showing kindness to those people around you. I think of all of the times where I have set an expectation that someone didn't even ever realize I was expecting from them, and how I was let down, but it was not through their negligence or any action of theirs, but my expectation of how they should have acted. Lisa shared about her story and how setting those expectations could damage relationships, and how not setting those expectations really protects everyone.
One thing I learned, and I learned it the hard way. I hate to learn things the hard way, but when you learn it the hard way, it sticks with you, right? Mm-hmm. So one thing I learned is do not put expectations on people, right? Mm-hmm. So just because I do something how I do it, I can't expect somebody else to give it back to me the same way. Because when you set those expectations on people, you end up getting heartbroken. You know, it just, and I'm not going to say all the time, but a lot of the time that happens, you know, like I can't put expectations on my coworkers or supervisors or anything like that. Like I expected them to say this. I expected them to do that, because when you do that, you know, it kind of, I don't want to say breaks your heart, but it kind of makes you look at them different. Like, why would you do that? Or why would you say that? Or why would you go behind my back? And, you know, even with family, like you can't put expectations on family. Like I expected you to love me, which means you will have my back, but that doesn't always happen. Mm. And in reverse, don't put expectations on me. You know, like when I lost my husband, people expected this of me, or expected me to do that. You can't do that. That's not fair. That's not fair to me. You know, because that's how I learned it. Putting expectations on my late husband's family, like they're supposed to do this, they're supposed to do that, but that's not fair to them because they're moving through grief just like I'm moving through grief. Mm. It just may look different for them than it looks for me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I kind of learned that, and I use that through life. Like, I'm not putting expectations on anybody, like not anyone, not work, not family, friends, anything. Like if I love you, and I'm going to love you through it. And that's what it is. I'm not going to expect you to do the same for me. So that's what I learned. Not that anybody told me that. It was just a hard lesson that I had to learn.
My next guest, Dr. Abby Mantor, shared so much about caring for people who are suffering, whether they're suffering grief and loss, whether they're suffering illness. That ability to care and show empathy was a core part of her story. The advice that she shared about knowledge and how we forget what it's like not to know something really speaks to caring for the people around you and showing empathy for what they know or don't know in a moment, in an experience, and even longer term. So this great advice can be applied across relationships, across situations.
Some advice I actually got from my journalism professor in college, Dr. Chenoweth. We were walking along campus. He was rattling on about something. I don't even know what it was. But he said something that has always stuck with me. He said, once we learn something, we forget what it's like to not know it.
Huh.
Yeah, once we learn something, we forget what it's like to not know it. And what that said to me was, I need to be a person of empathy who remembers and knows that there are people around me who don't know what I know. Whether that's, so that's like obvious for the classroom, right? So I step into an Old Testament literature classroom and like they don't know about suzerain vassal treaties in the ancient Near East, but I do. And so I have to teach that to them and help them to process what that means and what it means for the Old Testament, right? When I'm teaching Hebrew, right? Like they don't even know what the letters mean, let alone how to identify the past narrative or an infinitive, right? So in the classroom, there's a certain level of, okay, I need to have grace. I need to make sure that I know how to clearly explain this so that they can go along the process. But in life, it also really applies because, so if you think about the sufferers among us, I have sat in grief for most of my life, at various times processing it in various ways. Over the last several years, I've processed a different kind of grief and I sat in it for a long time. And in that, sitting in that, God has spoken things to me. He has rewritten pieces of my identity, pieces of the way that I interact with the world. And I have grown through that process. But when I step in to care for somebody in their suffering, like if they're brand new and maybe they've lost a loved one or they're going through a divorce or whatever it happens to be, they have not sat with God for as long as I have. And that's a messy, messy process. It took me 15 years to learn how to set a good, healthy boundary with somebody and then stick to it, right? Like, and how obnoxious that had to be. Like, I remember the first person who's like, hey, Abby, you should probably set a boundary and say, hey, that's not going to be okay way to treat me. And I was like, yeah. And that was 15 years ago. And I'm sure she was frustrated but I just didn't know and I wasn't ready. And so keeping that at the top of my mind to say, just because somebody doesn't know something doesn't mean they're not smart, doesn't mean they're not capable, and it doesn't mean that they're ready to learn it either. Mm. So I need to sit with them in that process and give them grace and give them tools and watch them fail and give them love and support even in that, right? So that's coworkers, that's people at the checkout line. I mean, that's like everywhere. Some people just don't know, and that's okay. And I can teach and I can support, but mostly it helps me to see them as another person who's on their journey, just like I'm a person on my journey.
And my next guest, Emily Mitchell, is my dear cousin, and she shared so much about her life and how the interruptions in her life shaped her experiences. Then she also showed so much compassion for people around her. Both of her best advice moments that she shared had to do with how you view the world and the people in it. I think it's so important as we reflect through these different scenarios, through these different pieces of advice, that we consider how our view of the world can change based on the advice that we've received.
One time I was giving the kids a bath, mm-hmm. and John came in and we were discussing water temperature. And John said, you always heat up first because it's easier to cool down than to heat up. Just in terms of energy, like to get the water warm again is easier. And for some reason, I think about that a lot of like, what is the thing that I can do that's going to make this the easiest? And in some ways, that's probably not the greatest advice or that the best word to use, but it's more that idea of like flow like water. Like if I'm pushing for a life that I think is going to answer everything. And it's requiring so much of me that I'm like physically falling apart and my ego's out of control. And, my ADHD is unchecked and my neuroses are going crazy. And I'm in an unhealthy relationship with someone that is not helping, but is actively hurting, not in a physical way, but in a life way. Why not just do the thing that is going to make things easier and better, which is like, just let go. And so I think about that. And, I think a lot about my grandfather, who was a U.S. senator and congressman, and how open he was to people from all walks of life. And they did a lot for, he grew up in Montana and then moved west, and they did a lot for natives. He and his family were, the Mitchells were pretty big into early Montana, Washington state history. They did a lot for the Native Americans, recognizing not only that their land has been taken, but they're being, degraded in society.
Stripped of dignity. Yeah.
Yeah. And just so I really learned from him not being judgmental and really saying we can be completely different. You and I can come from different ends of the spectrum, politically, financially, all of this stuff. But if you're a good person and you come from a good place, then we're going to connect. And, and to me, that's more important in a lot of ways. Now, it's getting a little harder to feel that way about people with our current politics and what's going on. But I truly believe that the majority of people want to help and not hurt.
And finally, Anna Wilson shared so much with us about hospitality, very practical aspects of how to enact hospitality in our lives, how to be hospitable. But her advice that she received from her husband talks about the why of hospitality, about how we've been welcomed in as children of God, and how when we welcome other people in, we model that same behavior.
Well, some of this goes along with the hospitality. And actually, my husband is one that has said it over and over. But, I'm a believer, follow Christ. And one of the things that he always says, as a believer, as a follower of Christ, when we walk in a room, even though we don't have the label of host, we are a host because we are modeling God loved us and welcomed us. And Jesus engaged people. And so we are to do the same. And that has always stuck with me. Anytime I walk in a room, and I joke sometimes I have to be like, okay, extrovert on, because sometimes it is hard, especially if you don't know that room, or if you're walking in a room and it's a younger generation, and they're like, well, here comes this old person with gray hair. What's up with that? Or, just with a neighbor that you're trying to reach out to. But anytime you are the person that needs to try to make them feel welcome, engage them, make them feel cared about.
Through this first season of BusyWise, I've been so thankful to be able to invite these people who have shared part of my life and shared their stories with you. The premise behind BusyWise is that we all have these everyday stories, these everyday experiences that teach us how to move through the world, how to show grace or compassion, how to treat other people, how we want to be treated. All of those experiences are important to share. At the end of this season, I wanted to share one piece of advice that I've received that I took into account in creating the podcast. So this piece of advice, I wish I could attribute it to one specific place, but it's like I heard it over and over and over again over the past year. And it's funny because as much as we deal with social media, and some of us love it and some of us hate it, and we're so polarized by it sometimes, a lot of times, if we're listening, there is wisdom to be heard. the piece of advice that I kept hearing, not directly to me, but put out in the world by all sorts of people, was to just start something. It may fail. It may fall apart. You're going to learn something. You're going to grow some way. Just start something. And that was the impetus for the brainstorm that became BusyWise. It was needing to start something, I wanted to share something with the world. I didn't necessarily want to be the center, but I know so many people who have so much great wisdom to share with everybody. And I just wanted to start telling that story. Thank you so much for sticking through this season with me as I learned, as I started something. I'm working actively on season 2. I have some great interviews lined up with some amazing people who have so much to share. If you're interested in sharing part of your story in BusyWise, or even if you want to nominate somebody, please send me a message. I would love to talk about what you would like to share and what wisdom or advice you'd like to give to the world. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, so that you won't miss season 2. We are going to be dropping all these episodes on all of your podcast platforms soon, so stay tuned for that. And we'll be sharing clips from season 1 all through the time between now and season 2. As always, I want to encourage you to look around your busy life at the things that you have going on right now and consider what have you learned through those experiences and who can you share them with.